Steve. Great to have you on. Thank you for your service. Um, First of all, tell us why you're running for governor.
Jim, New Jersey's the greatest state in the nation. And, we have some problems, but if you just want to be governor, not president, if you just want to be governor, you can start fixing the problems that we have here. And I'm the only one I think that's running that has no ambition to go any further. I love the state. We have problems because we've ignored them for too many years. I fixed a lot of things. I couldn't fix them all, but I'm in a position now that I, I know this stuff better than any of these candidates. And, leveraging higher education, like I look at higher education, honestly, as uh, business, big business, and, what we did with Rutgers with the higher education restructuring, right? Rutgers went from 58th in the nation to 15th now, right? Because we gave them the medical school component so they could be a real research university. Rowan University, we got them to an R2 now. They're the second school in the nation that has an MD, DO, and veterinary medical school. The only other one is Michigan State. And we grew Rowan from 9,500 students to 25,000, from a payroll of 190 million to 600 million, from 1,600 workers to 4,200 workers. So I see like education as a huge job developer. And with what's going on nationally right now, we got to be concerned because our institutions are going to get hurt. But if we get out in front of them, and under my builder's plan, which is in my website, stevesweeneyforgovernor.com, we want to create the New Jersey Intervention Commonwealth, which is basically a public venture capitalism program inspired by Silicon Valley and Israeli technology industry. And we will commercialize. We're going to fund, but we're going to commercialize businesses in New Jersey. So listen, there's ways to do things where you can squeeze all the juice. And that's what we're going to do by making sure we're partners when we create this innovation and then we create these industries here in New Jersey.
Yeah, no, that's a great setup for what I'm going to ask you next about the federal challenges. But before we do that, Steve, tell the folks who don't know your history uh, in the state Senate, in the legislature, because it's really impressive.
Well, my history, I'm a union iron worker. I didn't go to college. And if not for the birth of my daughter, who was born with Down syndrome, I would have never gotten involved in politics or never done any of this stuff. But it inspired me to fight for people with disabilities. And, you know, like I never expected any of this stuff. I ran for freeholder. I got elected. The next year they made me the director. Now I don't have a college degree. I'm like, wait a minute, guys, this is coming too fast. Then I ran for the Senate because my party asked me to against an incumbent, 28-year incumbent, and I beat him. And the guy had switched parties, and I'm in the Senate, and all of these guys are always trying to be the next Senate president, the next this and the next that. I didn't try to do any of it. And in 6 years, after 6 years in the Senate, they made me the majority leader. In 2 years after that, I became the Senate president. I was the longest serving Senate president in the history of the state. And but Jim, my success was I don't lie to people. And I know people, when they're talking to elected officials, don't believe that. But just like yesterday, I was at a meet and greet with a bunch of people, and a woman said, "We're against pipelines." I said, "I'm not." I said, we need energy right now. Energy prices are going to go through the roof. We got to come up with a strategy, and gas has to be part of that. And oh, by the way, I wrote all the green energy bills. I'm the one that wrote RGGI, Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We wrote the SRACs for solar. I wrote the ORACs for offshore wind, and I kept the nuclear plants from closing in 2018. It was 43% of all the power in the state of New Jersey that they were going to shut down. So I guess I come from an unconventional background. You know what I mean? Like I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't go to the Naval Academy. I went to apprenticeship school, but I wound up running the place.
Nice. That is such a thank you for your service, first of all. Now let's dive back into the federal situation we're in, right? The cuts, the proposed cuts, as I've written about, the assault on higher education and the effect it might have on research and development and innovation in our state. Is there anything you can do as governor or plan to do as governor in light of these challenges?
Well, listen, the reality is we have our front line of defense right now is the courts. The courts have slowed Trump down on many fronts because, the laws actually matter. In fact, the other day I was in a grocery store and a young man was telling me, the courts are corrupt and they're packed because they're defying the president's orders. I said, no. I said the courts have to follow the laws. So using the courts the best we can, and it's a strategy. It's a year and a half strategy because we got to get the Congress back. We have a real shot at getting Congress back. Then they have to start negotiating again. Jim, right now they're not negotiating. They're negotiating amongst themselves. And that's not good. So I would use the courts because that's really the tool. And I would partner with other states because if we can partner with other states, we'll actually be stronger in our defense of what they're trying to do. But in the meantime, we got to recognize the realities in this, right? We have to recognize we have a problem here, and they're going to cut funding. So what are we going to do to make sure we don't fall backwards? And my point is that's where we start investing. Like I said, it's been done in other places, so we can capitalize. Like I said, so it's really it's a public venture capitalism model. And we start investing and growing and creating new businesses. Rutgers, we always hear about carbon capture, right? Rutgers patented and will create and patent a product that captures carbon. So they put it back into the bricks where there's a lot of carbon, and it actually makes the brick stronger. And if the brick breaks, the carbon isn't released. It puts it back in the steel. Rutgers did that. That's a technology that the entire world is going to utilize. So, we should capitalize on those types of creations, to strengthen our universities, because now they're going to get, we're going to get a piece as a government, but the schools are getting a piece, which is less reliant on government dollars because they're going to use their innovation to bring more dollars in.
For sure, for sure. Now, what about on the community college level, right? Um, the latest budget calls for $20 million cuts to community colleges, um, or aid to community colleges. What's your take on that sector?
Well, it's frustrating, Jim, because look, the state of New Jersey has never lived up to its obligation when it comes to funding community colleges. Community colleges were created where the state was supposed to pay a third, the counties was pay a third, and the student pay a third. Well, the state's only paying about 20%. And it's great that we create free county college. It's great to provide that, but it's on the backs of the kids that are paying the tuition. You know what I'm saying? Like we have an obligation to, if we funded it properly, the cost would come down further. And now we're cutting $20 million, right? So we gave them $50 million for free county college. And now we're taking $20 million basically from their operation. So what we have to stop doing is creating this, doing that, and it's a shell game with money. You know, that's why we desperately need multi-year budgeting, because what happens here, and I'm proud because all the people that I've been debating against are now repeating, we need multi-year budgeting. But I'm the only one that said I would give up power as a governor to the legislature to do consensus forecasting, which is what a lot of states do, and multi-year budgeting, so that you don't have these swings, Jim. Like, how do you plan, and you're running a program this year in the free county college and all these other things, and all of a sudden next year you're losing 20 million. Now you're laying people off, you're cutting programs that people are relying on, and they might be halfway through the county college program and now they get hit with a bill. So we need to fund our institutions properly. What I was proud of when I was the Senate president, I met with all the college presidents, the university presidents, right? And I said, look, there's no funding, there's no average funding per student. So we said to all the college presidents, we're going to interject new money each year. And it's going to start raising all the lower funded schools up to where, the other schools are. And it was working. We started, it was Montclair and Stockton. Then it was Kane and I think Ryder or Rampopo. I forget which one's the public one there. But it was actually rising all boats, raising all boats. And with the county colleges, I came up with a plan, and it was mine, called 3+1, where kids can go to county college for 3 years at the county college tuition. The fourth year, they can go to the university, like Rowan University, and get a 4-year degree for less than $30,000. Now, that was met with enormous resistance from some of our 4-year schools. Rowan embraced it because Rowan is forward thinking. They embraced it. And so, if you think outside the box, you might have 100 failures, but you might have one success. But that one success is really going to make a difference in people's lives. Like I said, this 3+1 program, I'm thrilled with it. Rowan isn't having problems with enrollment now. You know what I mean? And the other part of it is it creates space at the 4 years by bringing a third year to the county college. So, and it's a choice, but it's a smart choice.
Yeah, yeah, that really sounds quite innovative and novel, and so cost effective, right? When we're facing a crisis of affordability, right? So let's move to the other federal issues that are challenging our state and our country, the tariffs. Now, as you know, the tariffs are going to affect small business, medium-sized businesses, even drug development, packaging for some of our most innovative industries. What is your, do you have a plan? Is there anything we can do to try to keep, costs down and counter this reality that's still unfolding?
Well, again, I'm going to repeat myself some. We got to rely on the courts. Now, there was a tariff court that ruled against Trump, saying you don't have the authority to do this. Now, another court just said, hold so he still can do it with these tariffs. But yeah, I think the plan is getting Congress off their backsides and starting to fight a little bit here. You know what I mean? This is a congressional, action that should be being taken, not unilaterally by the president. Now, there's only one more Republican vote than a Democrat vote down there right now. So, they might be afraid of Trump, but maybe if we scare them enough, they might be afraid of their constituents, and start doing things that are for their constituent base, not against us here in New Jersey, like watching, hey, listen, Jeff Van Drew signed a letter saying, I will not support any custom Medicaid. And then he voted for it. You know what I mean? It's like we have, and remember what these are for. All these cuts are to give tax breaks to corporations and billionaires. And like I said, it's not okay to hurt. Government has a role, Jim. Government has a role, and it shouldn't be everything for everyone. Believe me, I'm not that big government guy. I'm the furthest from it. But government has a role to protect people that can't take care of themselves. And it's like my daughter Lauren, who has Down syndrome. What did she do wrong? You know what I mean? That you would try to hurt her to help again, it's like, and I'm pro-business. I'm not anti-business. It's just that this is ridiculous that we're making these type of cuts. And oh, by the way, it's not improving anything. You saw this Doge stuff, right? Well, the president cut more jobs than any other president was Bill Clinton. I don't know if you know that. And when he did it, no one recognized, no one like, oh my God, look what they're doing. Look at the circus with the chainsaw and everything else. He did it in a responsible and meaningful way. And I think they cut like 800,000 jobs.
Wow.
Oh yeah, you go back and look at it. It was under the Clinton administration that they government got too big. You know what I mean? So, but you do it in a way that you're not going to disrupt services. You do it with a scalpel, not a sledgehammer.
For sure, for sure. Let's talk about the other federal challenges regarding immigration, right?
Yeah.
This state, more than probably most other states, relies on immigrants, from low-level workers to the smartest talent on the planet.
Yeah.
Um, how do you see that issue, and how do you think we might counter that the challenges that we're facing, scaring away future talent, future workers.
But Jim, when I was a Senate president, I had the opportunity to go to labs in Princeton, where I saw the world. There were students from all over the world. And by the way, they were the brightest kids in their country. And they're here. Now, why would we scare them or make them think they shouldn't want to come here? Obviously, they came here because they were striving for the best, and we have the best. But they make us the best. You know what I'm saying? When you get the top talent from the world, and that's Princeton. Princeton, the reason why New Jersey's got a pharmaceutical industry is Princeton. It's so when you look at these things, again, the nonsense of attacking, like Harvard's at the tip of the spear right now, but Harvard's got the guts to fight back. And, we just need some successes here. And if we fight back, we're going to win. Now, the state doesn't have as many tools. Again, a lot of this stuff with the feds is in the feds' purview. So, like when I hear people saying, I'm going to run for governor, to fight Trump, well, if you're in Congress, it's kind of your job. You know what I mean? Not, that's the front line. So we're going to rely on our courts a hell of a lot. But like I said, our focus has to be the midterms so that we get one of these branches, if not both branches, back under Democrat control. So at least there's a balance. And when you look at it, if you look at some polls, 47% of the people want us to work with Trump, 47% don't. That's in New Jersey. Now immigration is a huge issue, and I think I made some noise because they said I didn't support the immigrant trust doctrine. And, we need a pathway for people that are coming here participating in the economy. You know what I'm saying? Like paying taxes. They're going to work every day. They're not committing crimes. They're just trying to have a better life for their families. Like all the other groups that have come here, like my dad's had a sign said Irish need not apply to 1915. You know what I mean? Like immigrants come here. It's pretty tough in the beginning, but they blend in but the lack of a pathway to become a citizen, this isn't fair. You know what I mean? Like I said, if you're a criminal and you came here, you're going back. If you break the laws here, you're going back. It's real simple because it's a privilege and an honor to be here in this country.
For
But
sure,
for
for
those
sure.
people that are just trying to make a better life for themselves and are paying taxes, like you said, oh, and Jim, what would happen to this state if we sent everyone back? How many businesses would close? So look, there's a reality that this country has always relied on immigrants. The Germans, the Polish, the Italians, the Irish, you know what I mean? So, you know, the difference in this administration is it's easy to point out some illegal immigrants because they look different. Now, Eastern Europeans, you're not seeing them rounded up as much. You know what I mean? So there's a tinge of racism here too that has to be acknowledged. So let's get this pathway so people that have been here 10 years, how many places have you been to, I've been to, where you see the same waiter or busboy or, and they've been there 10 years. And they're not here legally because you look at the car, outside this and it's got a Pennsylvania tag or it's got a North Carolina tag because they can't get the insurances, that they need here. So
Right.
yeah, we got to come up with a pathway.
Yep, for sure. What about taxes? Other states like Pennsylvania have lower taxes, and obviously we have a high cost state. Is there anything, how do you view it, any ways to give folks relief or give corporates, the CBT obviously is an issue and
Yeah.
transit fee. What's your take on that?
Well, to be honest with you, it was my idea for the transit fee because at the time the corporations went from 35% to 21% in taxes for doing nothing from the federal government. And we need to fund transit because that does help industry if we have reliable transit. And for people today to think about what I'm about to say is New Jersey was the envy of the country in mass transit at one point prior to Christie Whitman. And it was the lack of investment and people ignoring it that led to it to being where it's at. So we need a fee. And listen, and the corporations were very honest, they weren't happy. But what will make them very unhappy is if the money winds up in the black hole of the budget. That money absolutely needs to be constitutionally dedicated so that that money does not disappear because that's what happens, Jim. They create these taxes for a purpose, and the next thing you know, the purpose that it's been created for isn't being addressed, and the money's going down the black hole. So, like I said, but we have to stop taxing in New Jersey. And I said it, I'm not going to raise taxes. And this isn't a George Bush moment. I'm serious. We're done raising taxes. You know, I put a 2% property tax cap in place in 2011. It was my bill. Christie was 2.5. I was 2. And property taxes just passed $10,000 on average in New Jersey. If we had not done the 2%, we would be passing 15,000. So this brings to question, Jim, and this is the big issue. How do we think we're ever going to reduce cost if we're going to continue to deliver government the way we're delivering it? We got the most expensive form of government. We have home rule. So the public has to start to recognize we can't afford this. So one of the things I called for, and again, the other candidates are all calling for it now, is make every school district a K to 12 or pre-K to 12. Eliminate the K to 2s, the 4s, the 6s, the 8s, the sending districts. These are the school districts that send like to a regional high school. And what you'll find out, Jim, they all teach different math and English and science. They're going to the same high school, but each district is teaching differently, which means they're all buying different books, so it's more expensive. They're all buying different software, so it's more expensive. We have the most inefficient type of government in the country, and that's why it's so expensive. But when you go to the regional high school, every town is represented on that high school board. So let's wipe out all those extra superintendents, all the HR departments. You know what I mean? So where you had 5 school districts going to a regional high school, which means you have 6, administrations, have 1. It will save you money. And it's not going to hurt the school because the school's going to have a principal. It's just not going to have an administration in it. So Mrs. Brown will still be the 4th grade history teacher. And you know what I mean? It's like the world won't come to an end. I've done this stuff. I've done more consolidation and shared services than anybody in the state. And people are so afraid of change Like we were the first countywide EMS system in the state. It was because of a crisis we created it. Monmouth just duplicated what we did, which I'm thrilled. You want to see them do. We run half of the ambulances we had than before when it was all scattered, half. And we have the fastest response times, and it costs less money. But when we were doing it, the squads were driving around the courthouse with their lights on their ambulances and their sirens blaring, protesting us. Now the same people say, seriously, people kind of come up to me and said, I can't believe I was against this. This is the best thing you guys ever did. You know what I mean? But but it has to happen in order for us to get a more affordable state.
For sure. Um, yeah, change is hard. Change is hard. That's why we need leadership. Um, One last question, Steve. This has been really great. The EDA, as you know, the EDA has launched a lot of programs over the past few years. What's your take on that organization and continuing those initiatives going forward?
And I want to say something. At first, when Tim Sullivan came along, I was I wasn't in favor of him, and I was wrong. I was really wrong. The guy's done a great job, and I'd like to publicly have the opportunity to say that. And I think the EDA is an enormous tool to help us bring business into this state. Look, we're competing. I don't know if you remember when the Sixers were toying with us, and we have to compete because they're real opportunities. So the EDA is critically important. In the southern New Jersey, we're right across from Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia had the Keystone Enterprise Zone. And that was an incentive program that lured businesses out of New Jersey into Pennsylvania. We couldn't compete with that. We couldn't compete with that without incentives. You have to realize states are constantly competing against each other for those same businesses. And right now, we're not the attractive, the most attractive one because our tax structure is too high. I told somebody the greatest threat to New Jersey right now is Governor Josh Shapiro. He's a bright guy. He's lowering the corporate business tax. Their income tax is 3.07. You know what I mean? So, it makes Pennsylvania very attractive for people and businesses to move to. So, we only can blame ourselves. I can't blame Josh for doing what he needs to do to get his state the businesses that they're trying to do. I give him all the credit in the world because like I said, I think he's dynamite governor. But we can't go unarmed and compete against people that have we have a cap gun and they got howitzers. We have to be able to compete. And look what we've done with the film industry. Netflix. That doesn't happen without incentives. And so it's worth it. They work, and we have to remember we're in competition globally, nationally, and we have to make sure that we position ourselves that we can stand up and compete. Because what New Jersey does have is location, right? We're in the middle of 60 million people, and we have the most intelligent workforce in the nation. We have those two things to leverage, but we'll lose them to other states if we're not careful.
Yeah, that is certainly true. Certainly true. This has been great. Steve, do you have any parting thoughts for folks for our community going forward?
Yeah, listen, we elect the right people that actually know how government works. You can start on day one, and you can get things done. That's my sales pitch to people, Jim. I know where the lights and bathrooms are on day one. I've watched every governor I ever dealt with wanting to be president of the United States, going all the way back to Jim McGreevey. Corzine left the Senate to be governor so he could run for president. Christie wanted to be president. Murphy wanted to be president. What's wrong with just wanting to fix New Jersey? You know what I mean? It's the greatest state, there's nowhere better. except we've made it too expensive.